We now know the full extent of the Baltimore Ravens 2025 schedule, and Roquan Smith did not hold back on the Bills, the team the Ravens will be playing on Sunday Night Football to open up the year. We talk about that, Lamar Jackson and Ravens discourse already beginning, and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host here with you today, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day, your first listen each and every single day. And we are free and available on all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, and in audio form where you can follow along and subscribe as well. 5 days a week here on Locked On Ravens of daily Ravens content. And we have former Baltimore Ravens wide receiver and Super Bowl champion Qadry Ismail back with us here today to break down a very busy week for the Baltimore Ravens, Q, in all facets. And we'll get into everything on today's show, but just a very brief rundown. Obviously, the unfortunate news of Darius Washington's injury. The Ravens signed Derrick Henry to an extension. The schedule has been released fully. We now know when, where, who, how the Ravens will be playing their season this year. And on top of all that, as we'll get to here in the first part of the show, Roquan Smith is talking a little spicy about those Buffalo Bills right now. He is fired up and ready to get that game going in week one.
I tell you what, it's fun when you don't have to know the guessing game of different general managers and figuring out who's going to do what with their offseason. You now are into that next phase where it's, okay, we know the schedule. We know that the offseason is going to start to formulate itself into who's going to be on the roster, what it's going to look like, who you're playing in the preseason, who you're about to, start the season off with. And yes, shots are fired when you're talking about Roquan Smith being Roquan Smith. Ro is back. Let's go.
It's in classic Roquan fashion, him talking a little spicy about those Buffalo Bills. And the reason Kiwi's doing it, obviously, is the Ravens will open up the year on Sunday Night Football against that Buffalo Bills team. I don't know what it is with the NFL. I'm just loving to have the Ravens go back to the place where their season ended these past 2 years. It was Kansas City last year. They lost by a toe. Now they'll have the opportunity to right the wrongs that happened in the divisional round this past year against the Buffalo Bills. Now, Roquan went on NFL Network. He talked with Rich Eisen about the schedule and how it all shook out for them. And he was asked about what game kind of pops up to you, what sticks out. And he said that Bills game in week one, and talked about how that game is going to be a revenge game of sorts. And really a chilling message here to Buffalo saying, quote, revenge is best served as a cold dish. So it will be nice to get up there in Buffalo and get a little payback. He also talked about how the guys last year, the Buffalo Bills, they won that game fair and square. He said, quote, misery sets in all offseason, and you use that as motivation all offseason. So just knowing we have everything it takes to be the best team in the NFL and have that game in and game out, it starts up there in Buffalo. He said he wants to unleash it on those guys. So Q, pretty spicy comments from Roquan there. I don't think they're misguided. I think Baltimore's fired up to get this season started after a couple of disappointing playoff exits the past two seasons. I mean, to me, how do you take Roquan's comments? Because I like this fire from Roquan. I think it's something that the whole team needs, and Roquan being a vocal leader on that team, I think it's a good tone to set for the season.
I honestly think the NFL, when it comes to the marketing, when it comes to the fan interest and how and they do it, what they had over 600,000 people in Green Bay, nothing there, Wisconsin for the NFL draft, to announce the schedule. All the teams have these like fancy viewing of a script. It is hilarious. My point is that when it comes down to it, you got to play the game. And I think for Roquan and for the Ravens, to start the league year off with the Bills after that bad taste in your mouth, in the divisional round, how perfect is that? And we, you and I, Raven fans, across the nation, the flock, we recognize what it was when it came down to the toe in opening week against the Kansas City Chiefs last year. But again, you're starting off with going to Buffalo. It's going to be a heck of a lot warmer this time around than it was in the divisional round. But I love it. I wouldn't have had it any other way. And I think it's important, though, that, yes, from a bigger picture standpoint, how do you want to kind of start off what you feel is an opportunity at yet again, here's the word, redemption. You have another year or another chance at redemption in the playoffs, because I think this is a team that's built. The regular season is the regular season, but you're built to win in the playoffs and go far. We've seen the mistakes every single year. It's been listed going way back. The only common denominator that's left now that Justin Tucker is gone, is John Harbaugh. That is associated with all the quote unquote disappointments of the postseason. So I think bigger picture wise, is this a scenario where, you make it all the way and don't get to San Francisco and don't look at, hoisting up the Lombardi? Is it going to be one of those do or die situations where, Steve Bisciotti is like, look, I was all in. We're aggressive with the draft. We're aggressive with free agency. We're aggressive in all these facets, and we came up short again. John, love you, brother, but you got to go. I'm not saying all that yet, but what I am saying is that to start this thing off with Buffalo, with all that entails on the back end, is genius by the NFL. Let's go Ravens. You got to lock in real early.
We are in the era of bulletin board material, the bulletin board material era, where everything you say gets pinned up on that bulletin board, and you say something like Roquan did. Oh, the Bills are going to use that as bulletin board material. They're going to put that up there. They're going to remember. Are you of this mindset with this quote here, this conversation that Roquan had with Rich Eisen? Do you think Buffalo's going to take this personally, and they're going to go out there, oh, we're going to go prove Roquan wrong? Or do you think that this is what the NFL needs more of when you talk about teams believing in themselves, them wanting to win, and then putting it out there for the world to hear it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think number one, that's healthy. I think number two, that's been Roquan, so this isn't anything new. And then number three, I think if you remember, there were some chippiness moments in the regular season game as well as the postseason. I know, Josh Allen and Lamar kind of, had the mutual respect vibe right at the end of the game, but no, this is par for the course. Like, this is what we want. We want, Roquan to talk smack. We want the Bills to be like, oh, bet. Come on, let's bring it on. I know that the flock definitely showed out as far as going up to Buffalo. I mean, that contingent was huge. But at the same time, from a bigger picture standpoint, you got to win. And I think it just makes you, like, if I'm Roquan, I'm locked in. Yo, bro, you know what you're doing. Hey, youngin, like, I know that you're a first round pick and all that. We need you, okay? Hey, fellas, listen. Adafe, you had all them double digits, all that. That's last year. Let's go. What you got for me now? Okay, like, fellas, here's what we are about to do to take this thing to the next level. And I think it's that kind of a attitude, Zach or all of them. Chuck Pagano's going to be on his game as well. So coaching staff, players, all that. And let's bring it on. September 7th, can't get here soon enough.
I'm so ready. I am ready. And you know what? Roquan's comments had me ready to run through a brick wall. That's how fired up I was getting about this, because look, I think that teams need that energy and that passion. You don't want your leader to go and say, yeah, it's just another game for us. It is what it is. Last season is, you want to feel like they feel some type of way about how the season ended, and they want to go out on their revenge tour. Now we're getting a little bit, we've maybe had a little too many revenge tours. Hopefully, they can actually win the Super Bowl this time around. There won't have to be any revenge tour next season for whatever team they would lose to in that scenario. Hopefully, they're able to just go out and do the thing this season. But I think you do want to feel that fire, that passion from your leaders. And Roquan, we know he puts that on display every time he's on the field and every time he's doing an interview. It doesn't matter what he's doing. Roquan is a fiery type of dude. But coming up in the second part of the show, with the schedule being out, some Ravens discourse, some Lamar Jackson discourse, and of course that MVP discourse is coming back into view. So we'll talk about that coming up next on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Gametime. There's nothing like the NBA playoffs, and me being a Nuggets fan, I've gone through a lot of heart-stopping games this year. Some have come out on the good side for Denver, some not so much. But if you want into that, Gametime makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest playoff games. Prices on the app actually go down and drop closer to tip-off, and with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees. Gametime is a total game changer, and for Game 6, Nuggets versus Thunder, I was curious. I was on the app looking at that game, and zone deals were offering 60% off in great sections. I'd love what I can see in my exact view before I buy. No surprises. Plus, with the NFL schedule release coming out, it just dropped, and you better believe I'm already looking at my fall calendar and picking which games to hit, especially in that early season stretch for the Ravens. And Gametime makes scoring NFL tickets just as easy, too. You can find great seats for as low as $100 thanks to exclusive discounts. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Back on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher with Qadry Ismail, still breaking down, honestly, Q, one of the busier weeks the Ravens have had offseason-wise in the past. I go back to the draft in 2023 when the Ravens signed Lamar Jackson 4 hours before the night one of the draft, and you had to pivot from, oh, hey, this is the biggest extension in Ravens history to, oh, hey, now they have a new receiver in Zay Flowers. So busy week for Baltimore. We'll get into a lot of the news coming up in the final part of the show, but I want to talk about some of the discourse that surrounded Baltimore really over the last 24 to 48 hours as we've had the full schedule come out and, you know, the season continues to creep closer and closer. One of them, actually, I've seen an interesting debate. This is particularly, I think, within the Ravens fan base as a whole, and people are talking about it. So I want to get your opinion, Q. You remember we talked a lot last year about that Kansas City game in week 1 and how they lost to Kansas City in the postseason the previous year, regular season game. How much does it really mean? And people are talking about the same type of stuff with the Buffalo game in terms of it being a lose-lose for the Ravens in week 1. And so the discourse there is if the Ravens win it, well, then it's just a regular season game. Who cares? You got to do it in the playoffs. And that'll be the narrative that surrounds Baltimore if they win. If they lose, then all the other playoff narratives are going to come back. The Ravens can't do this. They can't beat the Bills, yada, yada, yada. Do you think that this is a lose-lose situation for the Ravens with the Bills in week 1 being a regular season game with narratives popping up either way, regardless of the outcome? Or do you think that it means much more than that?
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about that. I think there's something to be said about, setting the tone week 1. So, yes, winning it, definitely, the pundits are going to be like, all right, the Ravens – mentally, they're locked in, they're ready to go. But us, the fan base, we're going to be like, yeah, we knew that we could beat the Bills. We need to worry about the postseason because we've experienced so much success during the regular season. I think nationally, if we lose, then it goes back to the old corny, debate of, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson and the MVP. Ooh, too early to tell who's, the MVP, but Josh clearly, if he has this amazing game, that whole flow. If it is a scenario where the Ravens just mud stomp them and Lamar has this phenomenal game, I think both nationally, I think for the Ravens fan base, I think if, key players play extremely well, the confidence is going to be there. And I think it is something that you can look to. I think it's great. I don't see this as, anything negative. Obviously, again, lose this game, then it's like, all right, John, what are we doing here? That sort of thing. Because he has a great staff. Offensive side of the ball has improved. Secondary coaching has improved. This will be another year for Zach Orr. As far as, what he brings to the table, you've drafted incredibly well. You got Lamar Jackson. End of the story, or end of discussion, I should say. So I think from a bigger picture standpoint, depending on how you lose, like if it's, comes down to being out-coached or, there's a mistake here or there that, that's something coaching-wise, I think that kind of stirs the pot for, the John Harbaugh critics.
It means something. I mean,
Yeah.
the Ravens started the year 0-2 last season. That set a pretty poor tone, right? It can be about setting a tone. And if they win one of those games last year, we're talking about them playing the division round in Baltimore instead of in Buffalo. So you have to kind of take into account all of that. Speaking of kind of the postseason discourse, that is obviously coming back as well. And Dan Orlovsky and Peter Schrager on ESPN talked about it, where Orlovsky called the Ravens the most interesting, fascinating, pressure-loaded team in the NFL. But their main point was, it comes down to the playoffs. And when that happens, Orlovsky said he's thinking about who's going to be the play or what's going to be the play to lose them the game. And Peter Schrager talking about the Ravens don't want to hear about September, October, November, December. It's what matters in January. And that every year this thing goes this way and they lose some way in the playoffs, after making the AFC Championship last year, Q. I mean, that was a step down. The division round was a step down. So, as this offseason has gone on, do you have any other thoughts on the Ravens postseason woes, their regular season success, and kind of how much you weigh each one?
Yeah, I think, all those points are really, really good. I think the one thing, from the depth of their coaching staff the year before and them getting the number 1 seed and making it to the AFC Championship game as the number 1 seed. But then I think what we saw this time around was it took Zach Orr and company to hit their stride, and like a player like a Trenton Simpson being benched, the Malik Harrisons of the world being added to the equation as a starter and all that entailed. That is where I felt like they were like, all right, cool. Our Darius Washington, hey, we need you, bro. Like, what's up? And so I think bigger picture wise, once they settled in, well, now they are settled in. If you feel what I'm saying, like they already got some guys there. Who knows what Trenton Simpson is going to do this year. Hopefully he's figured it out and mentally he's going to be able to have the game slow down for him. But that's where I think from a larger aspect of it all, this year's squad, there shouldn't be that middling, we got to figure it out piece. It should be hit the ground running. We know Todd Monken knows the rhythm of a Derrick Henry. Derrick got paid, so we know he knows the Ravens love him. We know that there is certainty with Ronnie Stanley. We know it. He got paid. He even said it himself. He's healthy. Let's go. Roger Rosengarten, he has another year under his belt. Let's go. The receiving core is intact. The only X factor for the week 1, elephant in the room, Mark Andrews. That's the only elephant in the room. Is Todd going to, throw him some love and give him 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 plays that are going to be like, yo, and Lamar already, that's his security blanket. So, that's something, but keep that in the back of your mind, like training camp, meh. He's a pro, he's all pro, or not all pro, but he's made, all pro and under his resume, and he has that kind of a resume as far as a pro bowler. So in other words, he's an upper tier player. So preseason really, so what? The regular season, that first game out and what it meant last year and kind of just getting that bad taste out of your mouth so you can kind of move forward is something that I'm keeping in the back of my mind. That's the one thing that I'm looking at like, ooh, kind of curious about.
That is a really good point. Something I didn't put together yet. So I'm glad you did, because there are going to be narratives around Mark Andrews after that game concludes. If he had a great game, oh, Mark is back, revenge tour, contract year. If he struggles or doesn't get a lot of looks, it'll be, oh man, was that the beginning of the end in the divisional round for Mark? It feels like that always happens. So we'll see how that all unfolds. And Q, I know for the Ravens, their MVP quarterback 2 times in a row should have been 3. But you know what? Josh Allen, he had a great season as well. I think those 2 quarterbacks are exceptional. Josh won the award, and there's conversation about which quarterback between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson actually needs the Super Bowl more. So coming up, we'll talk about that, as well as Derrick Henry, our Darius Washington, more scheduled talk, all coming up here on Locked On Ravens. Back on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher and Qadry Ismail wrapping up this episode with you here today. Still got a lot to dive into, including which of these 2 quarterbacks who are facing off on Sunday Night Football in Week 1, Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, needs the Super Bowl more. And this was a conversation that Emmanuel Acho had on the facility. He talked about this. This is the clip that's circulating right now. And he said that with the schedule that the Bills have, which admittedly is one of the easier ones in the league for a contender, he said this has to be the year for the Bills. It has to be. Josh Allen will put up repeat MVP numbers. And the Bills' schedule is easier this year. Now, that obviously has to do a little bit with the divisions they're playing. The Ravens obviously don't have that luxury this season. They're playing some tough divisions this year. But in my opinion, well, I guess the AFC East isn't that tough, but still. Baltimore.
Can't take it for granted, though.
No, absolutely not. But I think, to me, it's going to begin a whole nother year of this talk about these 2 quarterbacks. I think that for Lamar, every year for him is kind of a Super Bowl or bust year, especially with the discourse that he gets, how good he is, and the team that he has around him. We saw the arguments last year. Oh, the Ravens have all these Pro Bowlers. They have all these All-Pros, and Lamar was punished for that. Lamar was punished for having Derrick Henry in his backfield. Meanwhile, other quarterbacks like Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Mahomes, they were all praised for having weapons on their offense. So it feels like Lamar Jackson is playing an uphill battle when it comes to those talks. But the best thing about Lamar Q, he does not care. He tunes it out. He goes about his business. And that's, I think, what makes him, it's part of the reason why he's so successful. He doesn't care about what people say about him. He says, let me prove it to you on the field. And it's really cool that he does that each and every year.
I think it's interesting with Lamar going into year 8. It's where windows are now in the equation, like the window of winning. And as he wants to win a world championship, that window opening, closing argument is going to take on a different meaning. And while he might not care about that outside, but I promise you that internal clock for him, you're just getting that one more layer of hit on your body, that one more layer of like, okay, can I do it yet again in you? And when you're young, you can kind of slough all those things off. But as you age, it gets a cumulative effect on you. And I think his mental toughness is certainly going to be challenged and tested, when it comes to whether or not can I do it if things don't necessarily go according to plan early on. But I think he's one of those guys that is such an incredibly special talent. I think that he has the pieces around him that, it doesn't really matter what the outside says, as long as his guys are locked in, and he's been saying, stay locked in for good God, however long now. But I think this is, yes, the time. There is the now. There is the present. Let's do this. And you just, simply you can't worry about, the future and what it holds. But this year, this moment, this now for him, contractually, all the other things, business-wise, all that, that's all well and good. But man, from a pure keeping my promise, changing my number to number 1 as opposed to 8, that's first and foremost, in his mind, and it just can't waver, period, end of discussion.
Yeah, and I would just hate to see the discourse around Lamar and honestly all these other great quarterbacks turn into what it was last season, where it did get super toxic around Lamar and Josh Allen. I know you and I both have such respect for those 2 guys and how they both play the game. And, it's no secret. I made it pretty clear that I thought Lamar should have won the award last season, but that doesn't take away from what Josh did. And, I would hate to kind of have another year like that where I just want to be able to appreciate the greatness of all these guys. And I want Lamar to be able to be talked about in the same light as some of these guys and not have the criticism that some of these other guys don't get. So, we'll get there when we get there. It obviously hasn't fully started up yet because of the season, but the Ravens still, it doesn't mean that they're not busy. And we'll just go in order of kind of what happened this week, Q, because I know you have a lot of thoughts on these things. Let's start off with the unfortunate news first, and that is Darius Washington tears his Achilles while conditioning. He's going to be lost for most, if not all, of the 2025 season. Hugh, what are your thoughts on this scenario and this situation? What's generally a timeline for these types of things? I don't think we know whether it was a partial tear or a full tear at the time of this recording, but, I'm gutted for Darius, first of all. It just absolutely stinks for a guy that's worked so hard and had a great year last season. But I know that injuries are a part of the game, but it is really unfortunate when it happens when you're not actually on the football field playing in a game.
Yes. To be clear, I do know this to be true. When it comes to an Achilles injury, and I have spoken about this, been on record saying it so many times, a non-contact injury, an Achilles rupture, which usually the majority of the time is a non-contact injury. Let me preface it by saying, number one, Darius, I'm absolutely rooting that he gets the quickest, speediest recovery ever. It has nothing to do with surface, because if that was the case, the turf or the cleat or all that, then we wouldn't be looking at Jason Tatum rupturing his Achilles. Why? Because they don't play on turf, and they for darn sure don't have cleats on a hardwood floor. And you're talking about some of the best courts in all of sport when it comes to the NBA and the surface that they play on. So let's get that out the way. Now, when it comes to Darius and his injury, I have personal understanding and knowledge of an Achilles rupture. Achilles rupture is no joke. I had one myself. It is weird. You feel like you got somebody hit you or kicked you or, like what went on? And whether it be a partial tear or whether it be a full tear, whether it be high up on the gastroc right around there into the soleus, or whether it be right around the heel component where the Achilles attaches to, you got a tear. And it needs to be corrected because you're trying to do dynamic movements. I am saying this, that when you have your heel in the ground during training, your nervous system, central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, your receptors of where you're at in space and how you move and fire your components of your body, they never shut off. You're always feeding your body energy. And with that said, your brain is sending those signals down, those neural pathways. And when you send a signal that it's okay to be in this dynamic position, and then when you try to go out there and replicate under whatever the condition, if it's a conditioning, if it's a training, if it's a game, if it's a practice, you're putting yourself at risk for that non-contact catastrophic injury. People who've never played, people who think they know, they don't. I have been studying this for the last decade, and I understand clearer now than ever before. So I wish him the most speediest of recoveries. I think if he is aggressive with it, especially in those first critical 4 weeks of far as healing, and there's some really cool, awesome healing protocols that you can do. Like, I know I was back. They were like, oh, you shouldn't be out of the boot. I was out of my boot walking around in 4.5 weeks. I was doing aggressive movement in 8 weeks, and I didn't look back. 12 weeks, I was like, yeah, I'm jogging, running, moving. And so he can aggressively get back. But if he does heel in the ground training, yet again, it sets him up for a faulty pattern that will just fire when you least expect it. And you don't want that. not as you don't want that as a human, but as an elite athlete where your job depends upon it. You don't want that. And that's where Ardarius and lots of other guys, including Jason Tatum, that's where they're at.
Yeah, just an unfortunate situation all around, Q. And, you're wishing Ardarius the best. He's such a hard worker. And, it always just before the season even starts for him, before he has a chance to go get a contract and make some money here. Hopefully, we know the whole qualifying offer situation this offseason. This happens. He's such a hard worker. So thoughts and prayers, obviously, to Ardarius and his whole situation. But then, Q, we got the news of Derrick Henry and his extension. It's a 2-year deal, $30 million. Extension-wise, $25 million of that guaranteed. Very well-deserved for Derrick Henry, no doubt about that. People were kind of anticipating this was going to happen in some way, shape, or form, and now Henry's locked in with Baltimore through the 27-28 season. How you feeling about that?
Man, I just think that is so awesome for him and for the team. You clearly saw what he meant to the Ravens right around the game against the Dallas Cowboys is when, it just took off and never looked back. And then, from a money standpoint and just a talent aspect of things, that Buffalo Bills game, I was like, oh, yeah, there's no, old man legs at all at the running back spot with D. Hen. D. Hen is ready to do his thing. He takes incredibly great care of his body, really is a pro's pro. And I think he defines what it is to play like a Raven. And I think for the Ravens and him to come together for an agreement, for a contract extension, well done. And that's awesome.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Henry's someone who has clearly endeared himself to this fan base, the city. He loves it as well. So I think winners all around for Derrick Henry and the Ravens. Now, Q, quickly here, the Ravens schedule. We talked about that week 1 game in Buffalo. The Ravens are going to have a heck of a schedule this year, especially that early part of the season where they have the Bills, the Browns, the Lions, the Chiefs, the Texans, and the Rams. They have their bye in week 7, which to me is a little early. It's not the worst thing, but it's a little early. Then you got the Bears, the Dolphins, the Vikings, the Browns again, Jets, Bengals on Thanksgiving, Steelers, Bengals, Patriots, Packers, and Steelers again. My official predictions, I have the Ravens going 13-4 initially out of the gate with losses to the Chiefs, the Rams, the Steelers, and the Packers. Q, how do you feel like Baltimore's schedule shaped up, and what things did you notice in there?
So I looked at the first 6 weeks, and unfortunately you have that early bye. That's the tough part. Although, Thanksgiving, you kind of get that quasi bye, if you will, once you play that game. I love the fact that they have 10 home games. I love the first 6 weeks that, 4 of the 6 games are at home. So that helps. And yeah, I think bigger picture, those 6 weeks, outside of the Browns, you're looking at playoff caliber teams. So you got to start fast, and you got to, from a health standpoint and just pacing yourself standpoint, you got to make sure that, you're good, you're feeling great, because, week 6, I'd rather be like week 8, week 9, somewhere along those lines. But yeah, I think it's going to be a tough challenge. I could see where they beat the Chiefs and the Bills and lose to, the Browns and the Texans. So I would flip flop a little bit of what that first part of the season is. But that's only because of it being letdown-ish, or maybe it would be, they would have a close game against the Lions, and whomever wins the kicking job, if it is Tyler doesn't have the Justin Tucker magic of kicking against the Lions, and he misses a game winner for 53 yards, something along those lines. But I think something flukish is going to happen in that first 6 weeks. But I think that they get it done. See this thing, I think they get it done against the Bills and the Chiefs. I think that's something that we you and I would differ a little bit more on.
If they can get that done and they lose to the Texans or the Lions or something, I would take that trade-off 100%. But Q, appreciate you as always. Tell people where they can find you and what you're working. This is live from the field house at Missile Training. Is that where this is?
Yes, indeed. MissileTraining.com. MissileTraining.com is where you can find me, get a chance to understand movement in a better, more efficient way. And it doesn't matter the age, 6 to all the way up to my oldest client, 85. And he's doing extremely well. I think your bigger picture is missiletraining.com is where you can interact with me if you're a team or if you're an individual. Doesn't matter the sport. Got all your movement needs for you. And at the same time, WJZ, like I said, we got those 10 games. Well, Purple pregame. We're going to have a little different show format this year. I'm excited about that. We'll unveil that at some point in time. But at the same time, every single week, Locked on Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher, he and I, we give you all your Raven needs right here. Tune in, check us out. We do what we do best, and that's give you that Raven content.
You know it. So links to Q's work in the description down below. And of course, you can check him out here every week on Locked On Ravens. Q, appreciate you as always. Thank you to everybody who tuned in, watched, listened today to the show. We'll be back here soon on Locked On Ravens, breaking down more Ravens content. So be sure to like and subscribe in video form, follow along in audio form, and I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.